What's up, guys? 2008 GMC Acadia. This works for many years, and Chevy Traverse, Buick Enclave. We did all the brakes, front and rear, and this is the only caliper that was sticky, very hard to turn in, and plenty of life in the rear driver side, but it was grinding on the rear passenger, so we have a classic condition of sticky caliper wearing out the brakes really fast. Happens a lot on these aluminum calipers on GMC Chevy vehicles. We're going to start with an 11 millimeter and crack this brake hose free. Just make sure that it's not jammed on there, you know. We don't want to lose brake fluid yet, so close it back up a little bit. Just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be hard to take off. And we took the wheels off. That was a 7/8 or 21 millimeter socket. You gotta take your wheel cover off first with a little flathead screwdriver. So let's get this cracking. We got our 14 millimeter socket here. We're gonna get these two bolts loosened. Put ourselves a wrench. Whoa, I got a wrench that was way too big. I think it's like a 17 or 18 millimeter. Keeps that bolt still. That little sliding hardware. There's a hex inside of there where my wrench is, and it'll just keep spinning on you sometimes if you don't hold her still. There we go, there's our two bolts. Use a screwdriver to loosen up your caliper. This one's already loosened up because we just did the brakes. We want to take our brake pads out because those are getting reused. This is all brand new, hasn't been road driven yet. All right, now we got our, I believe, 18 millimeter. No. 21 millimeter. There's my 21. These are going to be on there pretty tight. Might have to use a bar on your ratchet to get that torque. That you need. Let's get this one loosened. There we go. Take them out by hand the rest of the way. Take the hardware out of the caliper bracket. That was brand new, but the new caliper should come with new hardware, so I'll probably use that. Now we're disassembled. All we got to do is take this caliper off. Loosen that 11 millimeter right there. As soon as we do, we're going to start losing brake fluid, so we want to have that new caliper ready. It should be getting delivered right now. So there's phase one right there, guys. We'll continue in a little bit. Alright guys, I'll let you know what I did off camera. Caliper came in, they wanted the core. It was like 60 some bucks for the core. It's actually like $2 more for the core than the part. Kind of crazy. Just got a remanufactured caliper. That's what was in stock. And so real quick, I took that banjo bolt off. The one that holds the brake hose to the caliper. Make sure you put it back on the same way it came off. And that's going to be with the little lip facing up on the caliper. So there's a copper washer on each side of the block of the brake hose. Make sure you have those copper washers on there. Now after I took the 11mm banjo bolt off the old caliper, the old banjo bolt wouldn't come out because this copper washer squishes into the threads of the bolt. So what I did is I put a vice grips on that washer and then turned the bolt. That's my favorite way of getting them off when they're stuck on. All right, so with the old caliper out of there, we took the new caliper out of the mounting bracket because this caliper came with the mounting bracket. Just set the caliper up there, tightened that banjo bolt as tight as I could with it flopping around like that. We're not leaking brake fluid out of it. We're gonna give it a little more torque when we're done. Got my new mounting bracket assembled, put the pads in, the hardware already came in it. Put a little extra high temp silicone-based brake grease in the sliding hardware. See these come out? These hexes, they slide in and out. So that's always a good thing to do. You don't have to. I recommend it. So now what we gotta do is fit this in here the right way. Smack us some bolts in there. Get this mounting bracket back on. 21 mil. We gotta check our brake fluid, make sure it's all the way at the max level. Actually a little higher than max because we're gonna bleed some out. I just did the front and rear brakes. And when you do the front and rear brakes, everything's 100%. That means your brake fluid should be right at the maximum line. But we're gonna bleed a little out, so we wanna fill it to the max and then a little bit more because we're gonna lose some when we bleed these brakes here in a second. If you live anywhere where they salt the roads frequently, like we do, get yourself a little tube of high temp silicone based brake grease. I use AGS by Silk Glide. It's the best stuff. Doesn't melt away, doesn't wash away. And put it on all the contact points. Don't get any grease on your friction surface of your rotor or the friction surface of your pads. We're gonna squeeze these pads together. Make sure the rotor is straight. Also put a little bit of that grease on the face of the piston of the caliper and the ears where they contact the backing plates of the pads. We got a couple of new bolts with the caliper. These bolts are really small. Make sure you get those bolts in the back, those big ones, those 21s, real nice and tight, as tight as you can. They're not gonna snap or anything. These ones though, they're skinny bolts. You won't get them nice and tight. But if you wrench on them too hard, don't snap them off. Where did our 14mm socket go, guys? What the heck? Where'd it go? 14, where are you? Good, I have no idea where I went. Let's grab another 14 here. Hopefully that'll work. And what size do we need for those bolts in the back? I don't know. The sliding hardware hexes. Here we go, we're back. 19 mil, too big. 18 mil, yeah, pretty close. 17 mil, just right. I hate to use a deep well for this, but I don't know where my shorty went. I like to just snug one up and then get the other side going. Nice new hardware going in by hand. We didn't even need the wrench on that hex. It didn't even spin for us. Sometimes they keep spinning. That's more of when you're taking them off than when you're putting them on, you know what I'm saying? All right, now we need our 11mm. Now that our caliper is nice and solid on there. We can give it a little more of a squish. Do not over torque these banjo bolts and strip out your threads in your caliper. That's going to avoid your warranty. They're going to make you pay for another one. There we go, nice and tight and squished, but not too tight we strip threads out. And we always double check that those squish washers sealed afterwards. All right, now we got this little cap on our bleeder. I cannot get it off with my fingernails. I just cut my fingernails. All right, that's gonna be either a 3/8 or a 10 millimeter. So we'll grab both of those sockets. And a screwdriver. So we can pop that cap off. Make sure you put this cap back on afterwards. Keeps the dirt out of the hole for the bleeder. You put a little grease on those threads. If you live up north, because they love to seize in and snap off. All right, guys, it's not a 10 millimeter. I lied to you. It's bigger. It's an 11. We already had an 11 handy. Let's go. Usually they're 10 millimeter. All right, so we're gonna open up this bleeder valve. What'll happen is we'll just start dripping some fluid. We'll just start gravity bleeding. It'll start going drip, drip, drip. If you need to know how to bleed brakes, watch a video. So the only air, we changed this brake hose so quickly. The only air that got inside here is the air that's in the caliper. So there's not very much air here in this caliper. So I'm gonna go call my boy and have him pump the brakes a few times, and then have him hold the brakes down, and I'll close the bleeder valve. He'll release the brakes, then I'll open the bleeder valve, and he'll press the brakes. Fluid will come out, I'll close it, then I'll tell him to release the brakes, then I'll open it, and then he'll press the brakes. That way it's not sucking fluid back in. That way it's always pushing out, because if you left it open while he released the brakes, then it would suck air back in. Threads on this seem a little stiff. Make sure that bleeder is not clogged up or anything. Now for this to gravity bleed at all, you would have to take the cap off the brake reservoir and press the brake one time, then it should start gravity bleeding a little bit. But I'm gonna go bleed this with my boy, and we did put a new caliper on, so you want to prime the brake pedal first before we start bleeding. So we'll start bleeding, and then at some point I'll close it, tell him pump it a few times, and the piston will start coming out on those brake pads so that they're primed. Never take off unless you prime your brake pedal, because you won't have no brakes till you hit the brake pedal 5, 6, 10, 20 times. All right? Throw the wheel back on, we'll take it for a test drive, right? All right, guys, take care. Hope you enjoyed, and catch you next time.